Carbohydrates have been both praised and punished, probably because they're largely misunderstood. When you hear the word carb, you probably picture foods like bread or rice or potatoes, and you'd be right. But you'd be just as right if fruits or vegetables or brown rice popped into your head. And you'd still be right if you thought of sugar or honey or jam or even a glass of milk. That's because lots of foods supply carbohydrate, which is a good thing. Because when it comes to keeping your body's engine running, carbohydrates are what your body relies on for fuel. Even though you can get your carbohydrates from brown rice just as easily as you can get them from a soda, that doesn't make all carbohydrate-containing foods equally good for you. Some of the best carbohydrates you can eat come from sources that are the least processed, like whole fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, and dairy products. That's because in addition to supplying carbohydrates, these foods also deliver vitamins and minerals, and in the case of plant foods, fiber and natural antioxidants too. On the other hand, it's the highly processed refined carbs like sugars, soda, pastries, and white flour breads, cereals, or crackers that are considered less healthy since they offer many fewer nutrients relative to their calorie cost. So it makes sense that we focus on meeting carbohydrate needs from the healthier sources since so many other nutrients are part of the package. All carbohydrates in food are made up of individual sugar units that can exist on their own or be hooked together in a chain. Simple sugars, or simple carbs, are made up of just one or two sugar units, like the single sugar fructose that's naturally found in fruits, or a 2-unit sugar called lactose that's naturally found in dairy products. Complex carbohydrates are made up of longer chains of sugars, and you'll find these in starches like potatoes or rice. As you digest these foods, the links that hold the individual sugar units together are broken, and ultimately, the single sugar units enter the bloodstream in a form called glucose. If you've heard the term blood sugar, it's the same thing. The glucose in your bloodstream is readily available for fuel, and glucose is also stored in your muscles and liver in a form called glycogen, so it can be tapped into as needed. Of course, if you eat too many calories from carbohydrates, or any food for that matter, the excess is stored as body fat. Since complex carbohydrates have more sugar units that need to be broken apart, they tend to take longer to digest than simple carbs do. And that means that complex carbs tend to release their sugar into the bloodstream more slowly than simple carbs do. Another factor that comes into play here is fiber. Many of the complex carbs that we eat are also good sources of fiber, which also slows digestion. These varying effects of carbohydrate on blood sugar have been measured and have been used to establish something called the glycemic index, or GI for short. The glycemic index ranks foods according to how much and how rapidly they cause the blood sugar to rise after they're eaten. As you might expect, the highest GI foods are those that are low in fiber, but starchy or sugary, like white bread, sweet breakfast cereals, noodles, fruit juices, and white rice. Since they're digested and absorbed relatively quickly, these high glycemic index foods tend to cause fairly large and rapid rises in blood sugar. On the other hand, the lowest GI foods tend to be those carbohydrate-rich foods that are whole and unprocessed. So, foods like vegetables, whole fruits, beans, and whole grains have relatively low glycemic index rankings. That's because they're high in fiber, which means they take longer to digest, so your blood sugar rises more gently after you've eaten them. Some of these foods also contain protein, which slows down the digestive process too and lowers the GI. Since low GI foods lead to a slower release of sugar into your bloodstream, they provide you with more sustained energy. And thanks to their high fiber content, they're more filling too. Another plus, whole or lightly processed low GI foods tend to retain their natural vitamins, minerals, and healthy antioxidant phytonutrients too, so you get more nutrition for your calories. This brings up another point that often comes up when discussing carbs, and that's the notion that they're just all sugar. You'll hear people say that they don't eat fruit because it's all sugar or loaded with carbs. Now, it's true that when you eat fruit, the overwhelming majority of the calories you consume are supplied by carbohydrates, mostly in the form of fructose, which is the natural sugar in the fruit. But that's the nature not just of fruit, but of all plant foods. They're predominantly carbohydrates, which include natural sugars, as well as starches and structural elements like cellulose that provide fiber. You'll also be picking up water, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients as part of the package. When you eat vegetables, the majority of the calories you're eating come from carbohydrates too, but you don't hear people complaining that vegetables are loaded with carbs. There's a big difference between the nutritional value of the foods that contain natural sugars and the foods that contain lots of added sugars that find their way into everything from brownies to barbecue sauce. A cup of strawberries has only about 7 grams of natural sugar. That's less than 2 teaspoons. But it also gives you 3 grams of fiber and also a day's worth of vitamin C, and it'll only cost you about 50 or 60 calories. Contrast that with a 20-ounce cola, which will set you back about 225 calories, and needless to say, won't be supplying any antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, or fiber. Instead, you'll just be chugging down some flavored carbonated water and about 1/3 of a cup of added sugar. Now that's what I would call full of sugar. The good carbs we've been talking about also provide fiber, something many of us don't get enough of. Fiber helps prevent constipation by moving the digestive process along, and high fiber foods tend to stay in the stomach a little longer and absorb water, which means they help fill us up too. Not all fibers function exactly the same way, which is why we often talk about 2 types of fiber, soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Soluble fibers dissolve in water and then thicken up, and they're found in apples, oranges, carrots, oats, barley, and beans. Water-soluble fibers not only help to fill you up, they're also the type of fiber that the healthy bacteria in your lower digestive tract like to feed on, which encourages these friendly bacteria to multiply. Rather than dissolving in water, insoluble fibers simply trap water in the lower tract, which increases their bulk. These fibers, found in vegetables, bran, and most whole grains, help to speed the passage of waste through your digestive system, so they help to keep you regular. As part of the Herbalife nutrition philosophy of balanced nutrition, we recommend that you get 25 grams of fiber daily from healthy carbohydrate sources, which is quite a bit more than the 10 grams that the average adult eats every day. If you're not eating as much fiber as you should, start looking at your food labels to find high fiber breads, cereals, and other grain products. Switch to whole grain breads, cereals, and pasta, and boost your fiber intake with side dishes of brown rice, beans, or quinoa. And load up on veggies and fruits, which are some of the best sources of fiber around. With all that carbs have going for them nutrient-wise, you might wonder why low carbohydrate diets are so popular. Actually, low-carb diets are nothing new. They've been around for more than 100 years. People are drawn to them because they promise fairly rapid weight loss. And with a focus on protein and fat, low-carb diets can do a pretty good job at controlling hunger. Our global nutrition philosophy recommends that you get about 40% of your daily calories from carbohydrate sources such as veggies, fruits, and whole grains to help you meet your nutrient and fiber needs. But a very low-carb plan like the keto diet calls for at most about 5% of your total daily calories from carbohydrate, which makes it nearly impossible to take in the recommended daily servings. Not only is a very low-carb diet unbalanced, it's also difficult to sustain, which means that any weight loss that occurs might be regained. And again, cutting out the good carbs means you'll miss out on an abundance of nutrients that these foods provide. The amount of carbohydrates you need every day depends in part on how many calories you burn and how active you are. Although we recommend that at least 40% of your daily calories come from carbohydrates, you might need more if you do a lot of extensive exercise. For a quick estimate, take your total daily calories and divide by 10. The answer you get is the minimum amount of carbohydrate in grams you should aim for each day. If you need 1,600 calories a day, then you should eat at least 160 grams of carbohydrate each day. When you're choosing which carbohydrate foods to eat in order to meet your needs, keep in mind that you could burn through your carb budget pretty quickly if most of your carbs are supplied by the less than healthy desserts, sodas, white bread, and chips. So keep your eye on the carbohydrate price. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, and dairy products should be the major sources of carbohydrates in your diet.